center and still are, even though they are no longer in this earth, the center of my heart and where a lot of my values came from. My grandpa used to work a third shift job in order for him to be able to watch me because they didn't have enough money to pay for daycare. And then when I went to school, he got a different job and things started changing up for them. So a lot of that grit and that desire to work and do something better comes from the example that I saw from them. I became homeless when I was 17, and I was pregnant by the time that I was 19. Had my son at 20, and at the age of 22, I had my first battle with breast cancer. And I tell you, it's just been a crazy journey in my life that I ended up moving to Wichita, got my degree after 8 years of trying in biology. And throughout that whole time, I thought that my life was unique. I thought that I was the only one with these problems. Obviously, there was something wrong with me for me to have all these horrible things happen. And finally, when I started working in my first job, I started working with students in Upward Bound. And it was the first time ever that I heard of other students and other young people who were living similar challenging situations like the one that I had. And it changed something in me because it helped me understand that I wasn't unique. And I knew that there were a whole bunch of people that came into my life at different points in time, whether it was when I was homeless, whether it was while I was still living with my mom in a very dysfunctional household, that my neighbor, who I still call mommy, fed me and took care of me. There's been people all over that have supported me. And I think that it was at that point in time that I realized that I could choose to use my challenges as a crutch, or sorry, my dog is talking too. He's very emotional about this. Or I could actually use my experiences to empower others. And that is exactly what started happening with my life. I started becoming involved at Wichita State University, worked with Upward Bound for a few years. Then I moved to Topeka after meeting the girls' dad. We got married, we relocated, started working at housing and credit counseling, helping families find financial freedom as they were paying their bills. In addition to that, later on, I became the executive director for Habitat. And you know, my whole life has been service. And when I was faced with the opportunity of whether I was going to run for Congress or I was going to stay as mayor, the first thing that I did was send close to 400 letters and reach out to people all over the county, the district, and in 25 counties. And what I heard was a lot of, again, my life story. I heard people that were challenged with paying medical bills. I heard about people that were frustrated that in their communities, they only had single roads of one road to go, one road to come. And they're talking about economic development not coming into their communities. And, you know, I heard about people concerned about education and having to pay these student loans. I've heard about our farmers that are struggling right now and just trying to understand how we come together as a country. And the other thing that I heard was people are tired. People are tired of the division. People are tired of the rhetoric and the accusations from one side to the other. And my heart was moved because what I found by reaching out was that your concerns are my concerns. Your concerns are the things that I have lived through, the things that I have been able to overcome, and the things that I will not forget when I'm in Washington so that I can continue advocating with your voice. So that's a little bit about me in like 4 or 5 minutes. I think that a lot of the other stuff you could read on, and don't want you to waste your time doing that. So I'm just gonna pause and start answering the questions that you guys have for me.
Okay, Michelle, thank you. Here's one that is on everybody's mind, I think, right now, and that relates to healthcare policy. What is your approach to healthcare policy, and has it changed in light of the pandemic?
No, it has not changed at all. Actually, it just cements our need. I am a huge advocate. It's a shame that in the richest country in the world, we are still not insuring our citizens and our residents in our country. I think it's a shame. Healthcare is something that everybody should have access to without having to worry about paying those bills. I can tell you that I remember having to look at the mail and just get anxiety because I knew what was in the mail, and I was not able to pay it. So my stance on healthcare is pretty pragmatic. I know that there's a lot of people that want Medicare for all as soon as possible. And my stance is that we should start with allowing for a public option, but also preserving the private options that we have. We have unions that have fought extremely hard to have the healthcare coverage that they have. And then we have corporations that are able to make payments to private insurers. But I do believe that we have to, number one, as soon as I get to Washington, preserve the Affordable Health Care Act, work on a way that we could expand Medicaid, continue putting pressure to the legislators here in Kansas so that that's a reality for our state. We also need to ensure that the dollars that are coming into states are available, but we also need to change that formula. In order for a family to qualify for Medicaid here in Kansas, they should not be making the threshold is extremely small, and that should not be the case. We should figure out a way of changing the income guideline for somebody to qualify for it, so that if they need to go to the public option, they can do that. And that way we could get more people insured. So those are my stances, and absolutely getting more people insured rings true, because right now we're starting to see the impacts in COVID of not having adequate preventative medicine. You start seeing demographics in our community that have not had access and what it's doing to them. And it's very easily reflected in the African American community and the Hispanic community, who is dying disproportionately of this virus because of the reasons that we all know. They don't have access.
Great. Can you explain the significance of the End Citizens United endorsement you received? And I guess that includes not accepting corporate money. Can you talk about that?
I am extremely excited to have their support. You know, it was an easy decision to sign the pledge and to talk to them and tell them about my values. I really believe that, first of all, let me say that sitting down every single day on a phone, making calls to ask for money is not my way to spend my campaign time. I wish that campaigns would be run differently, and I wish that interaction with people would just be everything that you have to do. The reality is that the way that campaigns function, you have to spend a ton of money in buying media. And right now, this campaign, more than any other campaign before, is going to significantly have to depend on reaching our voters in ways that are not physical because of the situation that we're in with this virus. So knowing that we have the endorsement of End Citizens United stating that we are not going to take any corporate money, that I am firmly giving the voice back to the citizens and to the residents of the United States to elect their leaders in Congress is extremely important to me. It's something that I hold with a lot of pride. And I'm looking forward to doing some election reform, because I tell you what, this whole system is all about keeping people like me away from running for office, and we're going to keep pushing.
Okay, thank you. How has your campaign strategy changed with the physical distancing restrictions of COVID-19? And what can we do to support your race?
First, please contact Steve and Lois Lopes. They are, so Lois is the chair of Lawrence, and then Steve is the awesome director of organizing for our campaign, and he's been reaching out to people from all over the 25 counties. And this is important to know, that we're going to need a lot of support for Steve and Lois, because we're going to have to reach people in a very different way. We're going to have to call people. We're going to have to reach out to them. We're going to have to call neighborhood parties of people that already live close to each other and feel comfortable talking. We're going to have to really mobilize people in a way that we have not had to do before. In addition, we're going to need to raise money. Most of our budget is going to go into TV ads and into sending people information via mail. We're going to have to do more Zoom meetings. We're going to have to just completely change the way that we do elections for this year. We're hoping that next year we'll have a vaccine and that we won't be having this conversation. But at this point in time, what it's done for us is that it's really set our eyes on ensuring that we have enough dollars in the coffer so that we could buy ads. The minimum budget for my race is $3.5 million, because we have 3 budgets. The race is really more looking at a $4 million race, $4.5 million race, in order for us to be competitive. And we're working hard and we're hustling. So if you can help us with that, that would be phenomenal. And the strategy has been just figuring out how we could maximize not only the phone calls, maximize interpersonal relationships, maximize Zoom, but also figuring out what are the other things that we could be doing. I mean, it's going to be a lot of online contact. So that's how we're looking at this right now.
Okay. My next question is actually a two-part question, and it comes from Nancy Thelman, County Commissioner. Part one, what can you do to help farmers and ranchers through the market disruption of COVID-19? And how do you envision our food system should change in the future?
Those are two phenomenal questions. And first of all, Commissioner Thelman, greetings and good evening. Thank you for being with us tonight. I think that the first thing that we need to do with our farmers is listen to them. I mean, plain and simple. I think that too often we get to Washington or we become elected officials and we automatically start believing that we have all the answers. And the reality is that we don't. One of the first things that I did was actually I visited Scotty and Miss Thelman's ranch. And I spoke with them and started to learn about what the issues are. What are the regulations that are impacting our farmers? What are the communications that they are needing? What are the things that we have in process that we need to approve? Are these MFP payments actually any good? And are they reaching our farmers and are they sustainable? And the answer to all of those things is we do need support. Like right now, we're telling our farmers you can, do hemp, right? So people got all excited, but then there's so many regulations that it's extremely difficult for them to even get loans in order for them to get that. So that's just one of the many ways that we have to support our farmers. So the first thing is to listen to them. The second thing is I'm excited to say that here in our community in Topeka, we have started working with Plug and Play so that we can start having conversations of what food is going to look like in the future. We need to start figuring out, number one, how we're going to support our farmers. How are we going to introduce technology? How are we going to just ensure that we are able to continue having crops? How are we going to do environmental protection so that we still have an earth, so that the crops are not so difficult, and so that we don't have the chaos that we had last year with all the flooding that we have because of climate change that we're having right now in all of our world. So we need to be very outspoken about climate change. We need to support research in the area of farming, and we need to continue talking to our farmers if we want to have food in the future.
Part two works better if I'm not muted. Part two, we all know that the Democratic Party is a big tent party with diversity of both people and opinions on policy. We as Democrats, however, sometimes forget that we have more in common than we don't. Regardless, the narrative persists of the rift between the moderate and progressive wings of the party. How will you and your campaign bridge this divide and unite the party to win in November?
So that is, that's a fully loaded question right there. Because here's the reality of that answer. I think that the answer to all of this is that it all goes back to you. It's gonna be up to us to determine what we really value. And as Democrats, are we going to attack each other? And are we going to feel dissatisfied because we have a candidate that does not automatically meet and check every single box that we wanted? And are we going to, in that same breath, allow for somebody else to get elected that is not going to even care about our needs and the needs of our communities? We've seen this play out before. And I think that it's time for us to start remembering that above all things, Democrat, Republican, we're Americans. And that we are in a time and in a place in which we need to change. And our party cannot be the party of division. Our party right now, in this crucial moment in history, has to come together. And we have to stop and pause and capitalize on the things that matter. And I think that the one thing that sets us apart as a party is that we are the party that cares about the worker. We're the party that cares about health. It may not be the same way that you want health to look like healthcare, but guess what? We still care about health. We still care about education. We still care about ensuring that every single American has opportunity and that we are able to fulfill that American dream. And it starts with us. It cannot go to one candidate, because guess what? One candidate can do only one thing. But I think that it has to come back to each and every one of us to understand that it's okay for us to have diversity of thought. But at the same time, consider the alternative. When you don't participate, you are giving a vote to somebody else. We need to come together and remember what our values are and understand that it may not be perfect, but gosh darn it, our values are so much more aligned than what the opposition has. And every time that you're not activated, you're giving a vote to somebody else. It's time to stop, and it's time to come together.
Thank you. Next question. In fact, you just mentioned education, and Lindsay Buck has this question. I would like to hear your platform on public education and your vision for the future of education.
So public education, let's get rid of those darn vouchers that they keep talking about. I mean, seriously, if we're gonna have vouchers, we should be talking about how we're going to infuse more dollars into the public schools that are not receiving the amount of money that they need to be the great equalizers that they were designed to be. So public education is critical. Public education and education, period, is the great equalizer that we have. My view for education, so like right now, we're looking at what education may have to look like a lot in the future, which is electronic. And in order for us to have that, guess what we need to have? We need to have access to broadband everywhere. Everywhere. We cannot continue to say that we are providing quality education and quality services when people don't even have access right now when they need it most to telehealth and to teleeducation. I think that I've always said this, it's kind of interesting. Even my daughter says the same thing. Our teachers are not being paid enough. They're being asked to manage and to handle so many things that they were not prepared for. Our teachers are not only teachers, they become parents, they become psychologists, they become therapists, they become parents in the classroom because they're feeding our kiddos that are showing up to school hungry. So we need to figure out a way of reimagining what education really looks like. Taking a look at what quality education is, and then start going in that direction. We cannot continue doing what we have been doing because it's not working. It's not working. So to me, public education looks a lot different in regards to the resources that are available inside of the classroom for the kids, and especially our kids that are in need of more resources so that they can be successful.
Thank you. David Willer would like to know where you stand on climate change, how you should address, how should we address global warming?
So like Kansas is number 3 in the nation with regards to wind energy. We need to keep capitalizing on that. And as government, we need to figure out ways to continue providing subsidies so that more people continue going towards green energy and renewable energy. The other thing that we need to start doing as well is investing in storage units. We don't yet have the technology that will allow us to have all this renewable energy stored, which is what's causing us a significant issue. So I think that we need to continue investing in storage. I had a great conversation with a group that was talking to me about a carbon tax. I've been talking about carbon taxing people eventually, but it was interesting. Their take was that instead of using that money to go towards the government, that carbon tax dollars will go back into the community, which I think is brilliant. I don't have enough information about it, but I'm looking into learning more about that. But absolutely, we need to preserve our planet. I mean, if we don't have a planet, then, you know, we're having kids for naught, right? If we don't preserve our planet, we're not going to have food. So it's extremely important for us to continue advocating for renewable energy and figuring out ways that we help people be greener, which is one of the reasons I'm super proud that I was also endorsed by the League of Conservation Voters, because this is one of my priorities as well.
We'll turn now, we had a number of questions came in about a variety of social justice concerns. And I'm wondering, too many to address all here, but could you address what you think the role of Congress should be in addressing social injustice? And then perhaps as one specific example, Carol Cadu-Blackwood had asked about what would be your support for the Violence Against Women Act. So maybe a little bit of a general and a little bit of a good example of what you might be able to do.
So I have always been supportive of the work against violence against women. I restarted the mayor's task force on domestic violence that was already in existence at the local YWCA. But I'm a huge supporter, and absolutely I will support VAWA. And the reason that it's not being passed right now is because there's legislation in there that states that if you have been an offender in domestic violence, you're not able to own a firearm, which I think is baloney. So that is absolutely a very easy way for me to advocate for social justice. I think that the other thing that we have a responsibility of doing as leaders is that as we see social injustices, we have to be able to speak up about them in such a way that we don't incite shame, but that we open up conversations. A great example is that my heart has been aching the last few days, and last night I literally cried myself as I was going to bed because I was looking through Facebook like I often do. And I saw the situation with Mr. George Floyd that happened in Minneapolis. And not only that, but a few weeks before, we had Ahmaud Arbery also had a situation. He was killed for just jogging in a neighborhood. And as leaders, we have to talk about this not being okay. And it doesn't mean that we're shaming our police officers, because they're not. It's not that all police officers are doing wrong things, but we have to talk about systemic racism in America. We have to talk about the issues that are occurring. We have to talk about how we have so many Native Americans that have been stripped from their land. I mean, there's so many things. Women not being able to receive equal pay. We're still advocating for things like that. The fact that I happen to be the first, minority that's running for Congress, well, second minority run for Congress, first Latina. It's crazy. It shouldn't be the case. And we should be able to have and open the opportunity for us to have crucial conversations about all of these issues without inciting shame, so that then we can all come together to figure out solutions. Because it's not until we understand that we can play a part in changing things that we're not able to move forward.
Okay, thank you. Another question. What steps are you going to take to connect with voters in the rural areas of the district?
So we were happy to report that we had already hit 10 of the 25 counties in 2 months. So that tells you how aggressive we were. God bless Steve Lopes for putting up with us for like 52 hours of being in a car and driving around and being introduced to people all across God's country. It was phenomenal. And we ended up having great conversations. I think that it's really interesting that people talk about the rural communities being different from the urban communities. And the reality is that we're all people, we're all Kansans, and we all have the same issues. And no matter which area of the state I have been in, the concerns are the same. So I think that the way that I'll reach out to my individuals, my families in the rural communities is the same way that I would approach anybody, as a human, and with kindness and with a desire to listen to their concerns so that I can lift their voices.
Okay, thank you. In the current climate of misinformation, negativity, and partisanship, what will you bring to the table to reverse this trend and bring about meaningful change?
Again, it starts with us. So one of the things that I have made sure is you will not hear me trashing anybody. There is no space for that. There is no space for partisan politics and for division. I think that right now is a time for us to come together and really address the issues that are plaguing our communities. I think that we fail when we start, alienating individuals just by basis of party or disagreement. The same way that I don't want our party to be divided, I don't want Republicans and Democrats to be divided, because above all things, we are Kansans and we're Americans. And I will absolutely treat my race for Congress in the same way that I treated my race for mayor, which was treating everybody with respect, not being negative about my opponents and trying to throw punches at people. My focus is going to be all of you, listening to your concerns and making sure that I can elevate your voice.
Excellent. It looks like we do have a little time left for a few questions from our chat comments and the folks that are here. Noreen Spears will moderate that part, and I'll help if she tells me what to do. Noreen, you're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you, Pat. And thank you, Michelle. And to all of you in the who are giving questions in chat, Thank you. We don't have too many, and there seems to be quite a theme on social justice tonight. So
I wonder why.
yes. So here's one from Lourdes, and I'm sorry, I know I will not pronounce the last name correctly. Immigrant workers are now seen as essential workers, but they often lack the most essential rights. How would you approach the issue of immigration in this post-COVID world?
So you asked about immigrant workers being essential workers. I'm going to say the same thing that I said a few weeks in a press conference. I think that this virus has not only demonstrated that immigrant workers are essential workers, but it's also demonstrated that those individuals that don't make more than $7.25 an hour are essential because they're keeping our economy moving. Because thanks to them, the individuals that don't make a lot of money, we are able to have groceries. We're able to go to the bank. We're able to have the commodities that we are accustomed to in this country, and they should not be forsaken. And it should bring about the fact that they're the ones putting themselves in danger every single day with this virus, showing up to work so that we can live the lifestyle that we live. And when it comes to immigrants, it's no different. They're our neighbors, they're our friends. We need to figure out a way that we could have an easier pathway to citizenship. A lot of people don't understand immigration law, and I am blessed and cursed with the fact that I used to work at Wichita State at the Office of International Education, working with J visas, working with I-20s, working with what it takes for an individual to become naturalized in this country. And there's only two pathways. You either get hired on with an H-1B visa, or you marry somebody that comes into the States. Or you have a significant amount of money and you start a business over here, and that's the only way for you to become a resident. And those things they're not fair. And then we are concerned about our neighbors in Mexico, but we don't issue the same sort of concerns in Canada. Now, that doesn't mean that our borders should absolutely be completely open and that we should embed individuals that are coming through our borders. But if we're going to do that, we have to do it also in the north, right? The other thing that we need to do is that we need to figure out a way that we can allow for individuals that are going to come here to work an opportunity to do so if they're not finding jobs, and just provide a easier way for individuals to come to this country and achieve the American dream. Again, not without checks and balances, but I think that right now, the way that the system is set up, it's a system of dollars per paperwork that the individuals that are coming here to do the work that a lot of people don't want to do don't even have access to. So sorry, long answer for it. I'm kind of passionate about that issue.
That's excellent. No, that was wonderful. Thank you. The other questions, we had two more in the social justice arena, and they both deal with healthcare. Here's the first one. There's a bias in our healthcare policy toward institutional versus home care for people with disabilities and the aging. As we have seen, this has had deadly results due to COVID-19. Would you support more tax dollars devoted to home care versus propping up the nursing home industry?
It's interesting. I have a really close relationship with David Beck, who's actually now in Lawrence, and he used to run Brewster Place here in Topeka. And one of the things that we talked about was one of the programs that they helped set up, which was actually supporting the elderly to age at home. And I absolutely think that it's important that we're able to do so. We can provide any individual that would like to be in their home, social workers and individuals, just the same way that we do with patients that have mental health issues. They could have visitors at home. There's so many things that we could do to support individuals to be at home. And I tell you what, there are dollars that we don't even have to add tax dollars. We just have to divert to change the way that we are reimbursing, because the dollars are there. And it's crazy to have an individual that has to pay $8,000 to live in a facility, rather than being able to divert the way that those dollars are being expended and earmarked for somebody that's able to stay at home and have the supportive services that they need there. So absolutely, that's a great conversation to have.
And the next one is that people with disabilities do not make the same wages as their able-bodied counterparts do. Would you support equal pay for disabled workers?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a shame that we live in a system that the same way that you have disabled individuals that do not get paid equally, you also have still other groups that are facing the same situations. A job is a job, and it should be compensated based on the job, not on the ability of an individual to do that job.
Thank you. We had a question. It's not really a question, but I know there's a lot of talk about bringing universal broadband into the rural areas. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think that we need to expand broadband. What's happened is that the companies that are in charge of expanding the system don't find an economic feasibility for them to do so in a rural community because of the cost that is, to do all the digging and the passing the wires and everything else. I think that this is a great place that Congress has the ability to partner with those private entities and provide incentives for them to continue expanding broadband, because right now is a big divide. And not only do we need to figure out ways of expanding broadband access all throughout our rural communities, but the other thing that we should also be doing is figuring out a way that we could support these corporations one way or the other, or incentivize, not support them, but incentivize them to figure out ways like Cox has, that has like different tiers, so the families that still need to have broadband, because now it's become a need, are able to have access to it for their kiddos when they're trying to go to school and do the work online.
Thank you. And here's one that is near and dear to our organization. How do we encourage the low propensity voters, or the people who don't typically vote? How do you
Y'all need to activate them. I need your guys' help. Steve needs your help. You remember the old Uncle Sam things? I need you. So this is what I need you. I need everybody to come on board and make sure that we are able to activate people, because you know what? I think that Lawrence, Kansas had 4,000 votes that were left on the table last time. Paul lost to 2,239 votes. I want you to hear this again. Lawrence left 4,000 votes, and Paul Davis left on the table 2,239 votes. I should not be talking to you unless history or the universe or God or whatever you worship to had a plan for me to be here, which I think is kind of crazy. But the reality is that all of us need to understand that each and every one of us has power in our vote. Our vote is the great equalizer. We need to remind those individuals, especially our socioeconomically depressed in our minority communities, that they need to come out and vote, because we cannot continue having our elections pass by us and then complain. Every vote matters. Every vote matters. You know what I say when people ask me, how do I engage people? I bring up Rosa Cavazos. She's a great friend of mine, ran for school board, and you know how many votes she won by? One vote. My race for mayor, you know how many votes I won by? 501 votes. If I wouldn't have had Joan Wagner driving people to the to the polls that day, I may have not have been the mayor of Topeka right now. Each and every one of you has the responsibility to remind people that, especially us women, we're celebrating suffrage this year, 100 years that we had the right to vote. It's time for us to take that seriously, and it's time for us to exercise that. And also, it's time for us to advocate that in a time like right now, we should be voting by mail. We should be safeguarding our post office. We should not have to be exposed just because we want to exercise our right. It's our right. It's our American right to vote. So just light a fire under people. We need to get this done. And we can. That's the thing. We can. This seat is attainable.
That was beautiful. Thank you. I think I'm going through the chat, and we've hit every topic, but this one I want to bring up this one. We have a very active, wonderful group of ladies and men called Moms Demand Action, and
yes,
you mentioned just a tiny bit in one of your answers, firearms. What are your thoughts? How do we stop gun violence in our country?
So that's That's a challenging subject. I am one of those individuals that I'm not going to use the term, but here's the deal. There should be easy solutions. I'm not going to use the common sense term, even though I just did. Easy solutions for us to ensure that people who have firearms are individuals that had a check. I have to go through a driver's test in order for me to get my license to drive my car. Why doesn't an individual that is going to purchase a firearm have to have the same safeguard if they choose to use the loophole of going into a gun show? Why? We need to figure out ways to have proper conversations with regards to the power of firearms. The amount of suicide of our young people by finding them in their homes is staggering. The deaths that we've had are across the country are people that probably shouldn't have had these firearms. And we understand that once one is taken out, another one is coming out and the issue escalates immediately. Now, please do not misunderstand. If you're a responsible gun owner and you have a farm, more power to you. This is not who I'm speaking to. What I'm speaking to is the access that individuals that don't have a place having access to firearms end up having, which cause a problem. Talking about responsible gun safety. I'll tell you, in Topeka, I think it was last year, we took 549 guns and felons in possession. 111 guns were taken from car theft. Should have never been taken from a car theft. We need to start having some really serious conversations about the use of firearms, the need of the caliber of firearms that people have in their household, so that those responsible gun owners are able to still have access to their guns. It's not about taking anybody's guns that is responsible with them, but we need to have a real conversation in this country with regards to the access that we have in our communities. And then the other thing that I think that we need to do, which is a little bit more complicated than just the regulations that we should be talking about, is also how are we failing our kids that they feel like firearms are the only solution to their problems. This is a really complex subject. There is no easy answer, but absolutely there should be some policies that we should look at so that we could ensure that the individuals that do have firearms in their home are people that could have firearms in their homes.
Thank you. Pat, how are we doing on time?
Well, we're starting to run out of time, and we did promise Michelle we would give her a few remarks at the end, and that we would tuck her into bed pretty early tonight so that she can get out there again tomorrow. I see one thing that I would flag that just came on was a question from Lauren about what do we do about people that are not even registered to vote? There are so many. And I think that's a good question. And yes, the Douglas County Democrats are working on that. Please contact us or Lois to volunteer. We would be glad to put you at work. We've been calling, we've been texting, and we'll put you to work. And now I will turn it over to Michelle. Michelle, I just want to say thank you so much for coming, for inspiring us, for nudging us onward. We thank you as Douglas County Democrats, and because you are our candidate, we would like you to have the last words of the meeting.
Well, thank you so much for that. Thank you all for being here and for being willing to engage in a new way. I know that you've heard this before, but I want you to hear that this election is special. We have lived through probably 3, almost 4 of the most tumultuous, anxiety-causing, confusing years that our country has seen. And these are 4 years that are not reflective of who you are. We have heard for so long that Kansas is a red state. We have heard for so long that Kansas is. But I want to remind all of you of who we are. We are the state that had the first woman governor. The first woman mayor. We are the state that advocated for desegregation. You in Douglas County had your town burned out because we refused to allow slavery. We have 3 women governors. We are Kansas. We're Americans above all things. And I don't think that any of us wants to see 2 or 4 additional years of individuals in Washington without representing your values. This election is personal to each and every one of us. Whether we are far left or we are in the middle, and even our friends in the right, this is an election for us to make a statement. This is an election for all of us to say no more. No more to the negative ad people saying horrible things about each other, because that's un-American. No more. No more to individuals not even caring and coming back to our district and talking to you. No more. No more to individuals that are going to say that they're going to support your healthcare and care for you, and they don't. No more. It's our year. 2020 is our year to change what is happening, not only in Kansas, but in our country. And I need every one of you to understand that you have power. You have unlimited power, not only to influence what happens in your home, but what happens in your neighborhoods and in your communities. And if you are not fired up and ready to go and call your neighbors, if you are not fired up to make sure that you are giving not only to my race, but to even Amy McGrath's race and Barbara Bollier's race, and ensuring that we change the slate of our people that are in the state offices so that Governor Kelly can actually pass legislation. If you are not going to say, I am done and I am fired up and I'm ready to make change, then you're not alive. It's time for us to reclaim who we are as Americans. It's time for us to have a government that reflects our values. It's time for us to be again that country that was looked upon with pride, that leader, global leader. And you with your vote can make that difference. So I want to thank all of you for being engaged tonight. I want to squeeze you for more engagement, not just for me, but for every single race that is happening, and to remind you that you matter. You matter, and you matter to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. We're all clapping.
Well,
Okay.
Goodbye, everyone.
Good night, all.
Thank you, Mayor.